Hello, everyone. Today we'll start off with Fielder popping off versus the Fusion on Volskaya, followed by that getting into some of the Titans news because there is a lot of it.
And if we ever move on from the Titans, we're going to take a look at the London Spitfire's return to play and then close out with our regular mailbag.
I'm Avast, this is Jayne, and welcome to Contested. What's up, guys? We are once again not live from the Frontier Communications Studio in Dallas, Texas. We are still in Texas, but we are not currently, well, I'm not at least in Dallas, Texas. Jayne is, I think, somewhere around there. But we're not live from the studio, which is the important part of that because we're obviously still at home, do all the COVID stay at homes order. That might be reevaluated soon. But we're currently just working from our own places.
Yeah, offices aren't quite open yet, but they have started opening up the restaurants. I actually went outside and saw the sun for the first time in seems like a year, and people were having all a huge margarita party. So
yeah, people were just frolicking in the
Yeah,
fields,
it was-
holding hands, coughing on each other. It's good stuff.
It has been a pretty crazy experience in America. Every single Friday at like 8 p.m., there's these like three apartments that almost like enclose a city block in the area where I live in. And people have been like bringing out loudspeakers and playing We Are the Champions like for an hour every Friday night. So America's super weird. But yeah, it seems everybody around here is super
Very
happy
Canadian thing to say.
Yeah,
Very
so-
Canadian thing to say.
Canadians are kind of like, there's so much land up in Canada and so few people. I mean, if you see somebody in the first place, even if they're on the horizon, you apologize and walk the other way, right? It's just
It's a classic America's hat type of thing to say right there. But we do have some Overwatch to get into besides just America societal weirdness, I guess. We
if
do
we
have
talked
some
about
Overwatch
that,
to
we'd
get
never
into.
end.
We can go into it for a while. And I'm in Texas, the America of America. So like it just gets
True.
just gets weirder. It's weirder as we go down the hole. And obviously you are, but we're first starting off with the popping off presented by Jack in the Box. And this week's popping off is Fielder, a new addition to the Paris Eternal, because they're on their third flex support now because Gray just announced his retirement and Eep before that announced his retirement. So they're on Fielder, who's still in Korea, which is the incredible part about this cup, one of the incredible parts, because they're playing the Fusion on Volskaya on a second first defense because they're in the midst of that. They're currently down 2-0. And this is where the Paris Eternals almost start their reverse sweep. Not quite in the end. But Fielder's going to be playing on that Mega Pack. All the Fusion are on the high ground. They've already traded one kill. Nico loses the 1v1 to EQO. What does Fielder do? He removes EQO, snipes him from that Sky, who is on that Echo. Then, it gets the Nano, a very, very good Nano here because Nosmite's able to just take some of that space, zone them out. He gets another anti up onto the high ground on Boombox, killing him afterwards with a couple shots. So now there's no sustain for the Fusion as they attack first. And remember, this is on OT now, so they have no sustain. They're down EQO. They're down a lot of damage. And then what is going to happen after that? The fight breaks down. Sure, they lose Nosmite, but Fielder's going to pick off Sato, who has fallen to the high ground and gets bashed by FD God. And as you watch the fight later on, you would say, wow, that's really good for Fielder. But Fusion, honestly, will probably still win this. They still have plenty of people on the point. They should contest. But they sort of C9, and they don't touch the point afterwards. So I would say that popping off moment is like, yes, Fielder did pop off. And sure, Fusion could have potentially won that still. And Fielder maybe didn't do everything. But removing 3, that's stacking the favor. That's stacking the pretty much everything. The probability in your favor there on that point is getting 3 kills. 3 very important kills from Fielder on 200 ping, mind you, 200. And that's the popping off.
I love that. You do such a great job of those. And it's kind of funny, we were talking about Fielder before the show as well. But when Eep retired, I love the way you say that as well.
It's the French pronunciation. All the French people told me that's how you're supposed to pronounce it.
Eep. Okay, so when Eep retired, I was like, oh, well, that's not a big deal. They've still got Gray, and Gray's a fantastic flex support. And then when Gray was retired, I was like, wait a second, this might actually be a problem. But then you were talking about Fielder. And yeah, do you want to share a little bit more about Fielder histories and how the Paris Eternal aren't actually in trouble, even though this is their third flex support?
I mean, really, they're not. I would say that they're not in trouble in general because the roster's still pretty good, and their Sparkle still hasn't even got to play yet. Who is sort of everyone was expecting Sparkle to be the huge like bombshell for the Paris Eternal, and Sparkle's not even built up. And then we had Xe come out. It was like, wow, Xe's really good. And now they have Fielder. And Fielder looks to be insane even on 200 ping in Korea because people thought like, wow, there's no way. Because I was like, how did they get Fielder here into the US? Because visas are already really hard to get. And then you have the COVID situation. And then I learned that he was playing online in their match versus the Fusion. So he's playing with like 200 plus ping and still was popping off the majority of that match. And obviously that segment we just did, the popping off powered by Jack in the Box. But I think that he was a very good flex support in Korea. I cast him a bit. He was with Jisoo Busan Wave. He was definitely behind the likes of like Gangnam Jin or Myungbong, but already he's made his way into the league now as a replacement for both Gray and now, or for Eep and also now Gray. And it's looking like once we get Fielder on NA ping, then this guy's going to be monstrous potentially.
Yeah. And it is Sparkle's birthday, if I'm not remembering wrong, is May 31st. So we're actually less than a month away from when we get to see Sparkle. So we're not going to have him for the Paris Eternal during the May tournament, which is the 15th and the 16th. But not long after that, Sparkle is going to be in play, and the most anticipated and hyped new player. Yeah, certainly he was absolutely crazy in Korean contenders. He was just
he was good. He was really good, and it's looking better in Overwatch League. So I think that's the crazy part of Paris, and is that sort of a wrapping up statement with Paris. And it's really, we didn't want to spend this much time talking about Paris, but is that this is a roster that came out like, wow, this is some interesting parts, and then they get exited and it was like, wow, this has gone only better, and some of their existing players have gone better. Then they put in a Fielder, they have fielded Fielder, and then everyone's like, this is just getting better and better with each iteration. So Paris Eternal are looking good for the Atlantic Division, mind you. Yeah. Remember, we're in the Atlantic Division.
So if you were a Vancouver Titans fan, maybe maybe they have some space for you as a refuge.
Yeah, if you were.
Is anyone still a Vancouver Titans fan? Is that the case?
I don't know. It depends, really.
Chat, are you a Vancouver Titans fan? Were
you
a Vancouver Titans fan?
I mean, we've done a good job of like, honestly, considering we've done a relatively decent job, because I've seen from people on Reddit or on Twitter, it's like, I still support this team, because the only reason I support this team is because it's my city, really, and I wasn't that interested before. So there are a couple people that really are, despite what people said that it wouldn't work at all for esports, the model, there are people that actually are latchkeyed on to the physical location of their team.
Absolutely, like that is definitely one of the main benefits of having the franchise system that the Overwatch League went to with these geolocated cities, right? The post that hit like the top of Reddit, where a guy was sharing his cabinet with all of his Vancouver Titans merchandise. Yes. Right there, like one of the people asked, like, what are you going to do now? And the guy was like, I'll probably still support the Vancouver Titans because I'm already in Vancouver, and it would feel weird to latch onto a different team. And even then there was some kind of some sadness overall, not as much anger as you might expect from the general comments that have been happening, but some of the people with the Vancouver Titans memorabilia have been like, oh, it's collectible now, like the silver lining of
only increases in value.
Only nobody else is going to get a signature with a Vancouver Titans roster.
Yeah, stonks only go up. They only
go up. So the collectors, as long as you don't, So like, it seemed like the fans were certainly sad and disappointed, but I think there was a lot of people who it's always the usual crowd who wants to be angry at something that we're just throwing stones at the Vancouver Titans organization.
Well, let's not go too crazy right off the bat, because I guess also we should announce as well, since we haven't actually said specifically what we're talking about, is that Titans officially announced after a couple early departures, they officially announced the roster's just gone. It's just like,
everyone. They currently have 0 active players. 0.
They are currently the only active Overwatch League team during the season that have 0 active players.
We were making fun of Boston for being down to 7 active players until we learned that the league rules had actually changed, so that you only need 7 active players. You don't even need 8 active players anymore. And we were like, oh, Boston got the rules changed, half joking. But now there is an active team in the Overwatch League with exactly 0 players on their roster. And do you want to tell me, Avast, how long until their next game?
It's like, at this point, we're at 3 days?
No, 3 days was yesterday. We're at 2 days.
2 days. Yeah, that's right. 2 days. I don't know how to do it. The days are merging into one for me.
Time's an illusion. That's what I keep saying. But yeah, we are 2 days. And I was really hoping for a roster announcement or something before this show happened. But it's literally Thursday evening. So it's not even like a full 2 days. And then the Vancouver Titans are going to play a game? So
I mean, we'll see. I mean, who knows? We already had the Boston potentially were ahead of hand to changing the league minimum. Maybe the new league minimum is 0, and so now we don't even have to play games. You just buy into the league and you don't even play. You just sit there. It's like it's almost like marble racing, which I've been doing on stream now. It's just a simulation more so than actual.
My favorite comment that I heard, and I wish I could take credit for this joke myself. Like, the game is against the Washington Justice, so even if they do pick up a new team, like, there's a legitimate chance they still have a shot. My favorite thing was that they were like, if the Titans don't show up, they should just have have the Washington Justice queue for ranked and see if they notice.
That actually also brings us into so the news as reported by ESPN Esports and some other outlets is that it's 100% going to be likely a North American contenders roster that is being, because also that's the only thing logistically, at least majority, because that's the only thing logistically that makes sense at this point with such short notice, is that you can't really field an all Korean team in particular, or Korean mix of Chinese players or anything like that, because of visa issues and COVID. So it has to be majority NA based at this point. And ESPN Esports says it's second wind, which I find funny.
It's crazy. Like the second win roster not all of them are 18. Iced and Speedily, I believe, who are actually two players that I've worked with personally myself, who are fantastic, like young prodigies. Like they're great players and definitely a contributing factor to the strength of second win. And two of the players from second win aren't even going to be able to go to the Vancouver Titans if the rumors are true. And by rumors, we mean like these are reported, like ESPN. This isn't something that Carter's tweeted. This is like ESPN saying that, like the Vancouver Titans are going to pick up an NA contenders roster. Apparently it's second win, but it's not going to be all of second win because not all of them are 18. And there was another point in there that they've already picked up 2 new players, and those 2 new players were ones that they were already looking at getting anyway before all this went down. So who really knows what's going on with the Vancouver Titans? But chop, time's a ticking, Vancouver.
Yeah, there's not a lot of time.
Yeah, we need to have something happen here.
We need to. I don't know what you. I was like, are you checking for a vein?
No, it's a watch.
Is that a watch? You hit watches now? I didn't. I don't own watches in this day and age.
Really?
I don't. I don't agree with watches. Okay, I know
you don't agree.
I don't
agree
with them because I have a phone.
I'm sure they're heartbroken.
But that's besides the point. Men's haberdashery items are besides the point here. The real point is that
we need to have a day of the word segment where I can just press a button and we go to haberdashery. Today's word of the day.
It's one of those words. I do think though that
hold on
crazy.
Chat is calling me a boomer for knowing watch.
What for liking? I mean, you don't have to be a boomer to like watches. I'm just saying I don't like watches.
I remember the day of wristwatches.
I think it's a waste of money. I think it's a waste of money. And you don't do anything. All it is, if you're going to have a watch for almost always, it's looking for a flex. It's never that you need it, generally, because you always have a phone or a clock.
Hey, man, ain't nothing wrong with flexing. Anyway, you were saying.
But yeah, we're moving beyond. We've gone beyond. We're getting much too into timepieces, okay? We're not talking about timepieces. Though I guess it's relevant because Vancouver Titans and times. But the point is that there's a contenders roster that they're picking up. Probably not even a full roster because, like you said, if it is second wind, some of those players aren't eligible. Mm-hmm. So already we're dealing with the fact that we have released a roster that hard dominated all of season 2 and went to grand finals. Sure, they didn't do great in finals, but they hard dominated. They have a storied history. They have all this tradition together. That's also why a huge number of fans are upset with him being gone, is that I think it's beyond just having a great roster that gets dropped mid-season, is that this is runaway. This was runaway. This was one of the most storied roster, if not the most storied roster in Overwatch esports.
Absolutely. We're looking at I went back and looked because I remembered this great gif from Jet Set Jamerson, who is a caster in the early days of Overwatch, and he was a massive Runaway fan. And one of the reasons that I first heard about Runaway when they were up and coming through the Contenders Korea tournament brackets, and they were a team that was immensely popular even when they weren't winning. They had 3 consecutive tournaments where they finished second, so they were so close, and they kept just barely missing out. And they Hoxel, I believe, was an individual who everyone thought that he was like this really kind of quite quite a proud individual, one of the young guys with a lot of talent. And he kind of broke down at one of the times where they lost the tournaments, and that was the thing where everyone were really supporting them. Of course, Runner and Flowervin, there was a lot of people who kind of treat that team not just as a team, not just as a franchise, but like a family. They definitely had a lot of aspects of a family to that team, and it had this great story. And then when they finally won, it was August of 2018 that they first won their contenders title. Like they got first place. The absolute, just everyone went crazy for that, and that really started a period of domination for Runaway. Like Runaway, after that point in time, got a lot more victories. It certainly was not their last one. So when you have this huge outpouring of people, it was definitely the most popular North American team, most popular Korean team in America. It had a massive following in Korea.
Was it more popular than New York? I don't actually know though at this point. I feel like New York has done a pretty excellent job for an all Korean roster, right?
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't know. I don't know the numbers. I'm just saying. I wonder if they actually are the most popular. Is the thing. I really don't know. But continue.
Of
That's more of an
contenders
aside.
teams. I was talking
Yeah,
of
of contenders teams. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, coming all the way over and then becoming the Vancouver Titans, having the great season, and then going and getting second place. Of course, there was the little drama. You know, Runaway's never been shy of drama throughout their entire thing, but they've been a great team and they had a great placement, and people are looking forward to continue. You know, it's not like Runaway as a fan base is used to getting second. If you get second in your Runaway, it just means you're going to get first place next year. So to have that kind of just fall apart, especially they had the 2 victories very early on in the season. People were already predicting them being first or second place. And then after that, of course, we were talking about this where the Vancouver Titans had those 2 big victories against the Los Angeles Gladiators and then the Los Angeles Valiant. And then they lost horribly in their next 2 games. So this is the same sort of thing that happened with Seoul, where we had this really good performance and then really bad performance. The thing is that now we actually have information about what happened during those 2 games, like why it was such a big transition from them doing really well the first 2 games to them doing really poorly in the next 2 games. And supposedly it's because the Vancouver Titans management didn't even tell the players that there was going to be a match. They didn't share the schedule with them, so they had no time to practice before these games. And obviously, if you don't practice, especially when it's coming into, you know, into more of the hero pool stuff, you're not going to win. So that was just one of the instances of miscommunication or mismanagement that has been thrown and levied against the Vancouver Titans organization. But at least it's not a bit of closure, but at least more information into like what the heck's going wrong. And that is just like the tip of the iceberg for all of the commentary that's been happening around the Titans recently.
Well, you know, I feel like though, when we hear the supposedly is a very important part to that, because Custa had a very cogent thought, which is not something I say for Custa often. And so I think that Custa said something that actually was like very relevant to the discussion, because he did an AMA on Reddit, and as someone you know has also had the pro player experience, and Custa's had obviously you know more stage time, but obviously a lot of experience in that area too. Is that team drama is not often fairly reported upon, or is very, or there's also a lot of, generally depending on where the source is, the information changes rapidly, you know?
Mhm.
And that's not to say that I think that all around, there's no other way to look at a roster falling apart at this level other than a failure at a management level.
100%.
Like, there is no way around that. That is 100% a failure. That is something that reflects poorly on the Titans management. And to have a roster that dominated a season 2 so hard and went to grand finals and had a pre-established, built-in fan base. Like, it was built in. It was already there. It was like they got the dough and they were already, it was pretty much all ready to go. It was ready. They got a pre-made everything, like one of those like rolls of cookies you can just put in the oven and they cook, you know? Like, you don't have to make anything. Like, that's what they got with the Titans and with the Runaway roster, and it fell apart. And they even got 2 of the largest, also other huge mainstays of Korean Overwatch esports and just popular figures, Ryu Jehong and Fissure, and who are both infamous for different reasons, but still both very famous. And so to have that fall apart and to have a roster like that did so well gone is a huge, huge failure on their part.
And it's actually
go on. No. Go on.
No. You had a butt.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well,
Mine can
the
wait.
point is, the butt was with capitalizing on the original point about Custa, was that it is really easy to say like, okay, this is all this team's fault. But then when you look at it from a different perspective of like, so you're telling me that a team that is competing in the Overwatch League is not going to tell their roster when they're playing?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, huh? So one of these things, so either that only leads 2 directions, right? Either one, the information isn't fully correct because that makes no sense, or 2, the Titans are so inherently incompetent because they were, and also this tied into them. They went to Korea. They, you know, the old XCC club. They went to
Korea.
But like, this was the news was that they went to Korea because they felt more comfortable there. Their families were there. Obviously, Korea had handled the COVID crisis without any doubt much better than the majority of the rest of the world, including where they're currently at. And so they just felt more comfortable there. And then it said, well, okay, Titans are not a traditional esports company. Like, sure, they're partnered with LG, but it's a VC group mostly with sports and entertainment. And so they probably and they don't really have any infrastructure in Korea. So then there was a lot of issue with communication there. And then it leads to believe that like, and then Janu comes out and said, we actually did it, or it was Twilight, I believe, it said we didn't want to go to Korea actually.
Yeah.
But it's like, but then why would you be in Korea? Why would Titans move you to Korea? So obviously there is something missing. And also on top of the internal rumors that were brewing at the end of season 2, when even Flowervin herself said, well, the team never had any issues, and they were having like a stream with her and Runner, but like the team, there was never any internal issues on the team. I'm like, that doesn't really line up with what other people have said and the performance of season 2. So I think there is definitely aspects that are being misreported on. And what Cussa said is 100% right, which is it's very tough to get an accurate portrayal of team drama of this scale, especially also since everything is passing through filters. We're not even getting this since we're majority English speaking, on this show, obviously, and also for the NA fan base. It's tough. This is all coming through a lot of times filters and translators. So it's not even necessarily us hearing it firsthand. And stuff can be lost in translation. So I do think that there is far more to this than just Titans org bad, runaway good. I think there's definitely some dichotomy in place. It might not be equal, but
the old saying where it's like there's 3 sides to every story. It's like yours, mine, and the truth. Especially when you're looking at like there was a Kotaku article that was also put out, but that article said that it was sources close to the team, which is very probably going to be on the side of the players. So even if you're being like, oh, it's not just the information we're hearing from the players, we're also hearing it from sources like ESPN and Kotaku. It's like, well, they might be a third party, but who are they getting information from? They're still going to be getting it from one side or the other. And so far, despite the one kind of like PR fluff piece that was put out by the Vancouver Titans, which a lot of people didn't like, and dream of the Houston Outlaws just said included lies, we don't have the full picture yet. We have a lot of questions that the Vancouver Titans organization should probably strongly consider answering if they want to be respected. But at the end of the day, they don't really have to. They are a VC group. You're looking at one of the kind of ways that the group has been framed is that they purchased Runaway more of like an asset that's going to be appreciate, not a team that they actually have to take care of or players that they have to work with. It was kind of just like, you're a pre-made team, you'll run yourself. And then Harsha, who was the assistant coach and left in December of 2019, again to the Houston Outlaws with Dream, he was supposedly acting as the general manager, basically, for the Vancouver Titans. And when he left, his job was not replaced. As far as I'm aware, the Vancouver Titans, they don't have to be public about this. Maybe they do have somebody serving in the GM role of the Vancouver Titans. But after Harsha's departure, I don't think he was replaced. So maybe there was, due to that, not the same level of communication or management that they previously enjoyed. Because one of the other things there's so many different things going on here that I want to cover. You talked about Rouge Hong and Fisher, and we'll get back to that. But one of the main things that was kind of brought up is that their departure to Korea, it's something the players didn't want, but the org is saying that they were doing it at the request of the players, and so the players felt more comfortable. But then you see the Runaway players who are talking about the fact that they were already planning on striking practice even before all of this happened. So the Vancouver Titans has put out this PR response being like, the same thing as the Los Angeles Valiant, I believe it was, who just said, COVID, let's fire these people, right? It's like,
yeah, which to be fair, like, it doesn't mean that it isn't necessarily true, but it's also just a very convenient excuse to like,
it's super convenient for a PR team. It's like, let's blame a pandemic. You can't be mad at us. It's an act of God. So yeah, but the fact the players are coming out saying that like they were already planning on striking practice before any of this went down. And one of the complaints that we do have a little bit of more information on is you talked about them picking up these, much more popular or like extremely popular Korean players, Fissure and Rouge Hong. But supposedly one of the allegations, and whether you consider this an actual slight against the team or just the players being a little bit greedy, is that after their solid performance of getting second place, they wanted to renegotiate their contracts. Supposedly that didn't happen. They kept on their previous contract amounts, and the extra money was spent on acquiring Rouge Hong and Fissure, who were being paid, again, supposedly more than the actual existing members of the Runaway. Now, on the opposite side of that, you can argue that that's why you were getting paid that amount in the first place, is because you were expected to be, a championship caliber team. But that is one of the things that is being talked about by the players, is things that were, not made happy. The salaries, the focus on picking up Rouge Hong and Fisher, and then the last one being the accommodations that they spent quite a long time in basically hotel rooms. So, and then
and well, I don't think they're not hotel rooms actually. I think you're referring to the Adamas Esports Training Plus Performance Center in the Vancouver. I think you're referring to that because that is the world-renowned Adamas Esports Training Plus Performance Center where the Titans were. And just to reiterate, the Adamas Esports Training Plus Performance Center. Okay, so really, you're not given enough credit. It's not just a hotel. Jayne.
Okay, how much did the PR team pay you?
I'm just reading the letter again because I was looking back at the letter. And people have been really memeing the fact that, like, you know, they to start out was like, guys, yes, we dropped our roster, but do you know they were in the Adamas Esports Training Plus Performance Facility? Like, they did it like a bunch of times in the beginning of the letter, and that was also one of the major points of contention. Supposedly, was the living conditions, and I'm sure also that's probably fairly true, honestly, because the old Titans house for season 2 was a mansion in like LA around there. And so I doubt that the training facility was like bad at all. But I do imagine that, especially since this isn't even unique to the Titans, and that like VC groups that are much more familiar with traditional sports than esports will often have facilities that are far more suited to those needs than to esport related needs. So I feel like that's honestly probably a pretty true fact there. And probably the players were upset over that, was that these accommodations were not exactly the same as they were used to and probably weren't as properly equipped for an esport team, since it is a sports training facility first. And then they sort of just tacked on the esports part second. They just added the E to the front of sports. So it's definitely, there are definitely legitimate complaints here. It's more of just the fact, where's the truth in it? And also, I think a really, really huge part of this allegation is how much of this was within, and people have been calling for Overwatch League head offices to investigate this, is how much is actually within contract rights and what the teams are allowed to do, because it says, okay, we mutually parted ways with all these people except Fissure. They made sure to clarify. It's like, no, we released Fissure. And so, and then the report came out and said, like, well, this report from, I think it was from Kotaku now, not ESPN, is that Kotaku said that they found essentially a non sequitur reason to cause a breach of contract in Fissure, because if there's in Overwatch League contracts, if you release someone without a cause, you have to pay it out. You can't just say like, okay, you're done, we're not gonna pay you out, unless it's they agree to mutually part ways. So the rest of the roster, since they mutually agreed to part ways, we can assume they weren't paid out, which is pretty obvious. But Fissure they released, and so normally that would be required them to pay out a contract. But if they did it for a breach of contract, if they found a reason, that means they don't have to pay out. And that's when people are saying that's, you know, potentially illegal. That is also against these rules that were put down by Overwatch League, and the head offices should investigate. And I imagine that if there's any credible evidence, the head offices should. But then it brings into the whole, who does the Overwatch League head office support here? Does it support the players, or does it support the people that have bought into their league?
Let's be honest here. The Overwatch League is definitely on the side of the franchises. They don't really care about any individual players. And really, even if the Vancouver Titans didn't have cause, and they just said that Fissure breached his contract anyway, which is one of the allegations, it's like, you breached it, we're canceling it. Like, you know, they can do whatever they want unless you're gonna sue for it. Like, what, really? And
Fissure's likely not gonna sue in the American legal system, when he's a Korean citizen.
I mean, what jurisdiction would you even sue them? Like, be Canadian jurisdiction, I guess.
Well, technically, it would be based off California law, I think, because all the Overwatch League contracts have to obey to California laws. But I'm not sure, that might have been changed with localization because they were they're a Canadian-based team. So I honestly don't know exactly anymore at this point. But in season 1, at least, all the rules had to apply to California labor laws.
Oh, cool.
So
I've been seeing a lot of comments in the chat about players' unions and things, and I don't know what your opinion is on the players' union, but this is something that's been looked at, I don't know how many times, a lot. Multiple people have tried it. I've looked into it a little bit myself. Without getting into details, it's not something that you should expect to happen.
No, I don't think there's really any actual players' unions in esports currently, besides there's like some ones, like there's the League of Legends ones, which is operated by Riot, so huge conflict of interest. There's one for Counter-Strike, and people argue about the effectiveness of it and how effectual it might be. And it gets a lot harder, in particular with esports, than it is, because already it's international. So you're dealing with players from all over the world that aren't always in the same location, like currently now. And two, and I was actually in the initial meetings in season 1. There was people that tried to set up initial start for the players union, and one of them was Morte, and Morte
Yeah.
was an old Overwatch player. He played professionally. I think it was United was the team, but I can't remember now at this
No, that
point.
sounds right.
And he's now moved into like player agencies for esports and things like that. Also, who else did that? It's Too Easy, so surprisingly enough. But like I learned that at Atlantic Showdown. But like, um, and they brought in a bunch of ex NBA and NFL players union reps, and people that came in and they talked about, these are logistics. This is what you need. Here's all this, and we had a bunch of players coming for season 1. And I was in on those meetings, and also a couple of very notable esport agents that operate across multiple games. And something that was brought up by esport agents to these, that these player reps from the NFL NBA was that how, like, there is a unique thing in esports that is different from sports, in that if you are, no sport is allowed to ban you from the game. You can be banned from leagues, but you can't be banned from the game of soccer or basketball. Like,
Yeah.
but because no one owns the intellectual property to set games. But Blizzard or Riot or Valve owns the intellectual property to the game and the platform that you play on. So if you were to be banned from that, there really is no recourse as a player, because then you are banned forever competing in that game. Obviously, it's different if you're banned from leagues, which is sort of what happened with like the iBuyPower roster in CSGO, where they could compete in certain leagues but not others. But if you're banned from a game, then it changes something else. And that's obviously different, a little bit different from esports, because it's more of like on a platform level, when a general game level, but it's still something that has to be acknowledged when you deal with player unions and reps. And there's all these logistic challenges that come into the fact. Then you're dealing with a bunch of 18 to 20-year-olds that spend like $10,000 on Gucci shoes, like, but they're not even making like true multi-million-dollar level money at all. Like, it's not like, fresh level in NFL or pro or, Premier League players in football and things like that. Like, these aren't making millions of dollars. These are guys at best making hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is still a lot of money, right? But it's
Mhm.
not like some sort of crazy amount that if you just budget it really well, it's going to last you for the rest of your life immediately, like sort of traditional pro sports. So there's a lot of hurdles with player unions.
Yeah, so if you're stuck on this unions thing, know that yes, sure, in a perfect world, that it's going to be something that should be done. But realistically, it's not something that you should expect to happen for a lot of reasons. For the reasons that Avast has laid out, for legal reasons that are be complicated and that I'm not going to be able to do a good job of actually reiterating. But also from the fact that there's just not actually interest from the players for a union.
There's
It's-
none.
there's
It's
none.
like when it was at its hotness, its absolute peak was when I was in those meetings, and it was still treated with indifference
Yeah,
and more of like,
absolutely.
what's going on? Like, so it's
I
not
mean,
something that's just could be like, let's make it so. Like, let's just have it happen. Like, there's a lot that goes into it,
yeah.
and there's a lot of extra
A lot of
intricacies.
moving pieces come together, and there's a lot of stakeholders who just don't want it. So
Yeah, and also
it's
some
just not
players,
gonna
and
happen.
also the reality is some players benefit currently from no players union compared to other players, because players that are very, very hot commodities in particular get a lot more from the rest not being unionized than like the lower level players and the new players and the non-veteran players, because of the fact, just because of their stake. That's just how it works. And so some people are actively incentivized, not necessarily to work against it, say like, no, I'm gonna break down, you just not participate and just be indifferent towards it.
Mhm.
So it is not really as simple as like we need to make a player union
I
happen.
mean,
But
it's not simple. This is probably one of the most complicated things to
yeah.
try. Yeah,
And
it's
neither of us are really qualified to talk about all the
no.
legal aspects, honestly. Like, neither of us really are. It's just from
The
my
the only
experience as a player,
experience,
just
yeah, the only experience we have is kind of just like being near it, hearing other people attempting it, seeing the attempts, the multiple attempts that have occurred or discussion. Like this is not the first time a players' union has been discussed, even a players' association, and every single time it flames out. Sometimes for the same reason, sometimes for a different reason. And at this point, I've absolutely resigned myself to the fact that there's never going to be a players' union.
yeah.
Even you're looking at like video game developers themselves, like even they aren't unionized, let alone the people who play the games. So.
And really there are no pronounced like barriers in place to stop it currently.
No.
Like, there really aren't. Like, Blizzard themselves has come out and said, and Overwatch, they'd be like, yeah, go start a players union. Like, do it. Like, we dare you, essentially, like, just do it.
Do it. You
Because
won't.
like they won't really I don't think they actually care if the players start a union necessarily. It's more the fact that at the end of the day, the players have to be the one to do it and to get and
Yeah.
actually make it happen. And so because also they are technically effective. A CDL essentially formed like a soft union it does not actually exist, but all the players like sort of talked to each other and made all these demands happen preseason. And it went pretty well for them, honestly. It went pretty well for them. But it's up to players to make it happen. And it's always on the players first for that to happen. So it's not, we can't just scream into the void, players union now, and then the players are like, oh, I've heard the cries of the people. I shall start a players union. It's just not going to happen. So
okay, well, we got to finish off this Titans topic, and I think we've talked enough about the reported rumors, the allegations, all of those discussions. But let's move back to talking about Second Wind, and specifically one of the members of Second Wind.
Kaluge is his name.
Well, the man formerly known as Kaluge.
Yeah, formerly known as Kaluge. The artist, now known as Higan.
Yes.
There was all these. Pretty much, Kaluge came from a team called Goats, which a very well-known Overwatch player by the name of Gator came from. And so it was a team that was notorious for not only popularizing the Goats composition, which is 3 tank 3 support, but also
being
some
extremely toxic,
unsavory behaviors. There's just been not good things happen sometimes. Now there's all this rumor now that Second Wind's being picked up, and Higan, aka Kaluge, was part of this roster that they were going to pick up that, and it would be like a Slur situation all over again for the Valiant, where Valiant picked up a player named Slur, who used to go by a different name in EU, and got dropped because of all this extreme toxicity and bad behavior that occurred and then they were going to give him a huge, give him a huge suspension. And for some players and for some teams, if they're going to give a player a huge suspension, right, and it's before the season even starts, or their season in particular starts, what is the value to the team to picking up that player?
Yeah, especially for a team like Vancouver Titans that basically need a running roster. Because again, game in 2 days, let's go, boys. But we might be underselling this a little bit. Like, they were toxic, they boosted, and have certainly been accused of being racist and sexist based on their remarks that happened on their own streams. It's not like they hid this behavior very much. And then Kaluge, I know that quite a few of them got disciplinary actions, but Kaluge himself, or Higan, was banned for a year from contenders, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
that is correct.
Like, this isn't stuff that's like the community just doesn't like his behavior. It's like Blizzard has taken action. So that unfortunately opens up a completely different can of worms, where it's like, oh, we've already taken action. He's already served his punishment. Does this kind of absolve him? Is he now good?
Well, the thing is that there's been a new piece of information, is that, like, coming out like an hour ago, there's been reports saying that
there's been
that he's no longer getting signed to the Titans, supposedly, because of these past allegations. I mean, they're not really allegations if they're true. Because they happened. They did. Yes. Like, they're allegations at that point.
That is a fact. Those things absolutely
have
occurred.
Evidence.
There's evidence.
And they've been punished for it. But it's more of then, where does the line get drawn of, if a player, especially since there's been a public outpouring of support from people that have played with them or against them, and he's a very different person now. And so it's that, then we get into a much larger discussion. This is even beyond Overwatch, right? It's like, now we're into like the whole cancel culture.
Yeah. Do you give people a second chance, really?
Do people get a chance to reform? Are they reformed? Do we know? Like, because if Kaluge has now lost this contract opportunity from Titans, that's a huge blow for a player, and likely now, if this is going to be thrown in his face every time. And I say thrown in his face, like, this is just the example. This is not me taking a stand necessarily of saying Kaluge should always, be barred from play forever, or he shouldn't. It's more of just, it's going to happen if he goes for a team. People are going to bring up this evidence again, likely. Should this prevent him from ever playing again, and especially ever getting into Overwatch League? Because apparently it's happened now for the Titans. That's the question.
Yeah, and I see that people are talking. There's the rumor again is going around that Kaluge's contract has already been canceled. I haven't seen that from an official source. I checked.
It has not. It's not been an official source. No.
So unless you guys have an official source, I mean, we never had an official source that Kaluge was being signed in the first place, other than ESPN's reporting. So nobody really knows for sure. The last official, or as close to official, source that we have is that Vancouver Titans was considering Second Wind, and even if his contract has since been canceled, the fact that he was considered in the first place was, that's a major question. Like, what was Vancouver Titans scouting, right? They've fired both their coaches. Harsha was already gone. Who is the individual part of the Vancouver Titans who are pulling the trigger on getting a new team? Like, did they just look at North American contenders and pick the top-ranked team? Actually,
well, I would assume that at this point, if they have no GM, because the active GM left a while ago, and they don't have any staff members, there's only really one person left, and he goes by the name of Steve Maida. He is the LG CEO. I have personally worked with him before, because under LG Evil, when I was signed with that team, and he is partnered with the Vancouver Titans VC group. And they partnered with Luminosity to help run their team. It's what a lot of teams in Overwatch League sort of did when they were just a VC head that had no esports capabilities or knowledge, is that they partnered with an org. So, for example, Gladiators last year partnered with P1, which later became Sentinels, or I guess Sentinels broke off from P1. It was one of those two, but their Cronky group partnered with them to help run their team. We also had, just various Vancouver's another one, obviously partnered with LG. So it's not unheard of for this. So if they're the only people left, then I would imagine that Steve Maida is the stand-in CEO
I
of the Vancouver
literally
Titans.
Just pulled up the contender standings. Since Second Wind is ranked 1, and Third Impact, who apparently has 2 of the players being picked up from them as well, they're ranked 2. So like, what are the chances that the Vancouver Titans were just like, I guess we need a new team. They need to be North American because we need visas. Let's just get the best North American team. Oh, these guys are under 18. Who's over 18 from the second ranked team? Hey, look.
And also, Steve, it also pre-aligns with my own knowledge of Steve. Where like since he was in Overwatch a long time ago, like, and even before Overwatch League, like back in the day, what would teams do to scout teams? They would just look at the Gosu Gamer rankings. So what is the difference? So just go to the rankings. Like, what's the good team? What teams pop it off?
After hearing the amount of work that people like Albert from the Florida Mayhem puts into like scouting his team, make sure people function and they have a goal, and then he's just like, I pick up best ranked team.
Well, to be fair, this is a unique situation because they don't have a roster and they have a game in a couple days. So the easiest solution is just to pick a pre-made team, or at least the majority of them.
Still signing people to a 2-year contract.
Well, is that guaranteed that they're getting 2-year contracts?
Isn't that the minimum for the league?
I'm honestly not sure. I thought it's just no. It used to be everyone was required to get 1+1, and they changed it to just be the minimum now is just a 1 year. So
that's new information.
So there's you don't have to give 2-year contracts. The minimum is a 1 year. So, and before it used to be a 1+1, which is the 1 year plus a team option. And now it's just a 1 year, and you don't have to have a team option involved at all if you don't want. So there's nothing that says that these players have to be under 2 years. It just could be 1 year, or just really how it works is like it's a contract, like a season link. So they'd be signed for like the remainder of the season almost. So it'd be prorated 1 year. So, I don't know exactly how they're doing it. I'm just saying that's my most likely guess. But the real thing here is that we're once again beyond it. It's like, this is a contenders team that has to play in Overwatch League. They're going to be coming in mid-season with almost probably very little notice at all, and playing against top and other Overwatch League level teams. And we pose this question to Packing. It's like, is this team just going to get stomped? Even if they're really good, is this team just going to get stomped? Because especially if we're mixing and matching members from other organizations, and now supposedly one of the members could be gone. Like, what is this? Does this team have any chance at all? Like, we're throwing in these players that get potentially just thrown to the wolves and get torn apart. And I don't know. I mean, it's a necessary evil, but is it because there's no other roster? But is this really ideal? Is this what we would like to see? And especially to prove if this Overwatch League and contenders gap is that big? Probably not. Now, it would be hilarious if they come in and they just roll like the bottom teams as like that would be funny. That would be really funny. Yeah. That would also then
I don't think it's gonna happen, but
it's possible. Yeah. It's possible.
Yeah.
And because also they'll come in hungry.
And the crazy irony about all of this is the fact that the runaway players are probably going to be free agents for a while. So like all of the Korean teams are basically full up. A lot of them still have subs, and like, where are you really gonna send these runaway guys? So
and also, if you're back in Korea, even if you were to get even if they wanted to sign them, unless every team is okay with having their players have 200+ ping all the rest of the season, like, because it's a nightmarish to get a visa in general, and also at this point with COVID, like how. I don't see it. It's going to be tough for runaway players, I think, at this point to find teams expediently. Now, it's possible. I could be very wrong, and teams could just be like, we need this guy. But I would favor logistics over player skill generally. Like, you can be the best player in the world, but if you have like 8,000 ping, then it doesn't matter. It really you'll be useless all the same if they had picked up a plat player. Now fielders may be putting it to shame, but I wonder how long that situation might even go on. So it's just bad. And then there's this whole separate issue of what we talked about earlier of, should we have a player? Do we want a Slur 2.0 situation?
Yeah, right.
And also, Slur's not even the first, because we had Ripa before that. Ripa for the Glads was benched for a very long time because apparently they did some toxicity in EU ranked. We've had situations
Funny
over and
Astro?
over and over again. Yeah, but I don't know
Yeah.
if Funny Astro was necessarily toxicity. It was boosting, but like
Yeah.
still,
Yeah.
the point remains, right? The point remains of like, is this a team lacking due diligence? Should a player even be punished for something that's happened years ago at this point, and people have all said they've reformed, and they've all been. I also remember they've been punished. It's been a year banned from contenders. Does that mean we have to have more punishment where they're barred from the league again? That's a really tough question to answer when you don't personally know the person. It's a trial of public opinion.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, and that's really, especially in a world where the Vancouver Titans is dealing with a crisis to their fan base, really. And when you are talking about the Overwatch League and your fan base and your audience, that is your primary source of revenue. It's not like
yes.
you're making a critical resource like food or something. It's like people can dislike you and still need to buy your product. It's like if people don't like your team, they're just not going to cheer the team. They're not going to buy jerseys. They're not going to watch the games. And I think going from Runaway to a team with an individual like Kalush or Higan on it is, regardless of if he has reformed, regardless of the punishment served, that's a massive blow from this team that has this absolutely storied history as an organization, as this grassroots Royal Road, just ragtag bunch of fighters. To have that be the people that you were cheering for, them get knocked out, and now a person where you're going to have this large discussion just to kind of be able to
Stomach the
justify
thought of them being there.
stomach
Yeah.
the thought of even cheering for them or associating with them. Like that is a big shift.
Yeah, and as a final, we have to move on at this point. We spent a lot of time with the Titans, but as a final side, I think that's honestly the most succinct way you could put it, Jayne, is that like this is it's just a disaster. Regardless of really where the fault exactly lies percentage wise, it still falls far more on the management because it's just disaster. It's, as I've made the joke, it's the first $20 million disband. A lot of teams have been close to that level, but they are now officially the first. And for Runaway to be that one, and now to have to pick up a bunch of random contenders players mid-season, and some have questionable paths too. If you're a fan of that and you're looking at this, like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to say anymore. I don't know how you can support that. But I mean, if you're a Boston fan, then I guess anything's possible. You guys can, people can fans, whatever. But we have to move on. We have to move on now because a team that also we didn't know what was going on with for a bit, and we haven't seen them play for a while, but probably less explosive than the Titans, is the London Spitfire, are finally returning to play.
They are returning. The last time they played was on March 1st, so 5 weeks, I guess, since they played last. And I mean, they are a team that's in an interesting spot. I think they're a team that we have the least amount of information on. Now, the funny thing about them is that, chat, I swear this is true, they are currently ranked 5th in the Overwatch League. 5th. Now, they're ranked 5th with a -3 map score and a win rate of 3-2, where the 3 wins that the London Spitfire have right now were all map 5s. Every single one of them went to map 5. So they have a negative win rate.
Against not great teams either.
Yeah, against not great teams. Florida Mayhem before they started improving. The Houston Outlaws and the Washington Justice. So these are like bottom tier Atlantic teams that they all went to map 5 for. But just to kind of like demonstrate how much of a weird state of flux this team is the fact that if they had lost any singular one of those map 5 games, instead of being ranked 5th, they would have been ranked 15th. So they this is a crazy amount of variability. We haven't seen them for a month. Glister looked fantastic. J-Mac Bernard looking great, but this is much more of a rookie squad. It's not the same squad that they had in season 1. And yeah, like they were doing, they were doing pretty well during those map 5s. This is like, again, they've played so long ago. The last game that they actually played against the Florida Mayhem was at one of the Houston homestands. So they haven't even played any online matches. If you're looking at any like the CDL games that have gone to online, maybe that's going to make a difference. But yeah, I don't know what to say here, is the fact that it's a team that's ranked 5th, could have been ranked 15th with the smallest of changes, like against the Washington Justice. They beat the Washington Justice by 4 meters on Dorado. And in their game against the Florida Mayhem, it was 99-99 on every single one of the control maps. So it's like...
And now they're in an arguably harder division too, because also even crazier than that is that In the Atlantic Conference specifically, they're currently ranked 3rd, as opposed to the 5th globally. They're ranked 3rd.
They're ranked above Atlanta,
they're
right?
ranked above Atlanta and right below New York. And also, just which is the craziest how this schedule's worked out too. So going down the list, Spitfire have played 5 games. New York, I guess going up technically, New York has played 6, and then Fusion have played 11. So Fusion have played over twice the amount of games that Spitfire have, and then Boston also have played 10 games. So it's insane that this team has been gone for so long. I don't even know how to even begin rating them. I really don't. I haven't even been trying to rate them. The last time I did power rankings, it's impossible. They're in a new division, new hero pools, new hero pool rule. The rules have changed like 8 times since the last time the Spitfire have played.
Yeah. They didn't even play with hero pools last time we saw them.
And that's nuts. That's crazy. And so now we don't. And this rookie roster, like, sure, there's some interesting components to it, but it gives me very, very little faith though moving in of like since they went to map 5s versus Justice and Outlaws and Mayhem before they were doing well, like, and got smashed by like Eternal New York. Like, this does not, because also once again they're in another division with New York again because New York's over in the Asian region.
Yeah.
So I am not feeling confident in the London Spitfire at all. But I really couldn't say how they're gonna perform because
I mean, I nobody knows for sure, but it's not like we have any reason to be like, woo, other than Glister. Like, you know, Glister is still, even though we haven't seen him, I know we discussed.
I mean, like, Bernard, I like Bernard.
Yeah, Bernard, like their tank line is great. You know, let's be honest. Shui isn't bad either, but like Glister is, you know, we haven't been talking about him for a candidate of like Rookie of the Year, probably just because we haven't seen him since March 1st, which is basically February.
Can't be a rookie if you never play.
It can't be a rookie if you never play. True story. But the opponents that they're going against this weekend, not all is lost because the opponents they're playing against are my personal favorite, of course, the great, glorious Chengdu Hunters, and then they're also playing the Guangzhou Charge. So teams that
actually a good barometer test though.
Yes,
playing against the Hunters first, that's actually a fantastic barometer test, I would say, for this team where they're sitting.
Yeah, Chengdu's sitting at 18th, which I think is 18 ranks too low for such a great squad. And then the Chengdu Hunters right now are not. Chengdu Hunters 18, Guangzhou Charge are sitting 14th. So if you were to kind of roll the dice and be like, oh, you did happen to just get the payload pushed 4 more meters or something, and you actually were 15th, I think that these are actually going to be great games for us to see where London actually stands. I expect the Guangzhou Charge game to be close. I have no idea what to expect from Chengdu. I never predict them. I just strap in and enjoy the ride. But yeah, after this weekend, we're definitely going to have more information about London than we do now because we basically have nothing. I mean,
yeah, I'm just glad that we're finally getting back on track. We're finally getting the last team into there. We're sort of seeing everyone playing again. Like, now I say that right after a whole team exploded, but like, you know, at least everyone's playing. You know, that's it. There's some. It's like a car. It's lost a wheel, but it's limping along still, and that's where we're at with the scheduling. But we've run a little bit long, so we need to talk. We need to get the mailbag. We need to get the mailbag because we asked a very interesting question to Pack.
Yeah, it was about the coaches, right?
Coaching, yes, it was about coaching.
Let me pull this up.
And I think this is a good. I want you to start too because you have a better perspective on it than me, I think, as someone that's actually been a coach. So I would like you to read the first mailbag comment and then to tell me what you think.
I absolutely will do that, Avast. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the mailbag segment, sponsored by no one. It's just the mailbag. How are you guys doing?
Just the mail.
Okay, first comment comes in from Joshua Van Overeem. I love that name. I think that a coach's skills are transferable depending upon the structure of the organization that the coach works for. In an organization where there are good assistant coaches that can teach the game specific elements, game sense, and compositions for Overwatch, a coach could be able to transfer between similar sports and games. Because the key traits of a head coach should be leadership and being able to analyze strengths and weaknesses. For example, having the high ground is good. The idea that transfers from Siege to Overwatch to Call of Duty, I mean, that's just geometry. But if a coach can look at simple geometry, if a coach can look at a VOD and determine the mistakes a team makes, they can still be an effective coach. So this is kind of an interesting one because I have a little bit of a more unique approach and opinion on coaching. So teaching game sense and composition for Overwatch, there are certain things that a coach is never going to be better at than a player. A player, especially somebody who grinds for 8 to 12 hours to the game, the coach is going to be able to look at things from a third person perspective. They're going to be looking at things that the players working together. But a professional player is going to know more about their role and being able to play their role to a higher level than coaches. That's something that should happen. And this is something that I get a lot of questions from people who want to start coaching. People are really, really worried that their players won't trust them or respect them because they don't know enough. And it's like your job isn't to know more than the players. That your job is to make the players better, make them play on a team. So you're not trying to teach them game sense. Like composition, sure, but these are the discussions that you should be having with your team. And things like teamwork, coordination, communication, all of those things are absolutely game independent. So even when you're kind of like looking at a VOD, even if you don't know any game sense about Overwatch, you can still get your players to work together as a group better than they could have been as individuals. And this is what we're seeing with kind of like player run teams, is that even if the coach doesn't know anything, they're at least that kind of veto power, where if two players have a disagreement, the coach can be like, okay, why do you think this? Why do you think this? And if there's can't get enough information, you can go to be like, talk to your support player. So if it's your DPS and your tank arguing, you can get both of them to talk about why they want to do this or do that. And then if you can't agree, you can bring up the support player, be like, how does this affect you? And get everybody to share their opinion, frame the conversation, and then just be the deciding voice to, pick the way forward. So there's tons of things with like social and group dynamics that are absolutely game independent. And I think this is a giant mischaracterization of a coach's job, is to know the game better than the players. It's not. Different aspects of the game, the third person perspective, the overhead perspectives, how things work as a group, different rollouts, analysis and scouting of your opponents and things like that. But knowing the game better or having better game sense than your players, good luck.
Good luck. And also to remind everyone, our mailbag question, because we had Packington, the head coach of the Valiant, on, was, do we think, because he brought up a point where he wanted to be sort of a coach across many different game titles, even into traditional sports potentially. So, or meat sports, as some people say. So the point is meat sports. So the topic was, is that possible? Is that ever possible? To what extent is a coaching skills transferable between games? And on the opposite side, the next comment was from Necrofear, who said, coaches are not transferable from game to game or really anything outside of the specific field. They are often high-skilled specialist technicians. The specific individuals have, however, demonstrated an ability to both learn and teach a skill, but such coaches would have to start from square one, the learning phase, before becoming a coach again when transferring game/fields. Now, a head coach is entirely transferable. Well, coaches are not transferable, but head coaches are. I thought a head coach is a coach, but I guess not. From game to game, as a good head coach is a manager. Managerial skills, which are very different from instructor skills, are transferable from game to game and into the general workforce. I could insert an entire textbook explaining the qualities of good directors, managers, supervisors, and workers. But suffice to say, from left to right, you could go from highly transferable skills to not very transferable skills. Sports equivalent titles would be general manager, head coach, coach, player.
Yes, I think that's a...
okay. I would generally specify as like assistant coach versus coach.
I was really confused at first, but when he started saying head coach, like, yeah, absolutely. Like, if you are talking about the assistant coaches, like if you're a role coach or something like that, absolutely. If you're an assistant coach or a role coach, you definitely need to know the game, or at least to the point where you know what needs to be improved. You're not going to expect to like out aim the opponent or something like that. But for example, there's ways that you can get around it even if you didn't. For example, like when I was working on the Dallas Fuel, I was the role coach for the supports, at least for part of the season. And like one of the things, depending on the meta, right? Unko might ask me a question like, oh, how do I use my transcendence here, right? And that's not a question that you go like, oh, Unko, obviously you are dumb and don't know how to use your transcendence. You've never played this Zen character before. Let me just give you a quick 2-sentence summary. Like when a player like Unko or something like that asks you a question like that, he's not expecting a canned response. So some of the situations you're looking for there is going to require analytics. This is a question where you're going to have to go through VODs. You're going to have to look to how other players do it to give him suggestions. You kind of, in that situation, even if there is no clear answer, because there's probably not, there's always trade-offs. It's like engineering. You can go and collect information for him, provide statistics, be like, it's like the San Francisco Shock, their Zen player uses it like this. The Boston Uprising player uses it like this. When you use the ultimate in this situation or encountering this ultimate, that means that you have like a 70% win rate. When you're using it here, you have a 60% win rate. And then we base it off of, if you win Yeah, like for example, if you're using Transcendence against a Graviton from a Zarya, for example, one of the factors that we have to consider is like if you actually wait to use your Zenyatta Transcendence against a Zarya's Graviton, what is the average charge rate of both ultimates? Because if your Transcendence charges longer than the Graviton, depending on the meta, then that's going to be changing how it's used, depending on like the ultimate that you're countering and the charge rates of the ultimate that you're countering. And it also can come down to the charge rate of the ultimate of like the player. So if you're playing against a good Zarya or an aggressive Zarya, for example, the way that you'd use your Transcendence in a macro level environment against Carpe and Sinatra is going to be much different than if you're playing against a much lower team with a less aggressive or a more kind of like team-oriented Zarya. Because I use that example specifically because Carpe and Sinatra were people in the GOATS meta who first really pioneered the triple angle, where Zaryas were like sitting on high grounds or on off angles, really quite removed from the rest of the team, and it was giving them a lot more ability to land high charge right clicks, and they were charging Gravitons way faster than Zenyatta's were charging Transcendence. So,
well, thank you, IBM Watson, for a quick recap of old usage. But I mean, it was not wrong overall. I think role coaching is honestly in esports at least a pretty new concept. I think, in fact, I'm not even aware of too many esports that even have a role coach outside of Overwatch. A lot of times, just a singular like head coach or maybe an assistant coach. Like, there's not really that many role coaches. So I would have to double check that, but I don't even think there's that many role coaches within any esports. Really, it's a lot of just head coaching because coaching is such a like new field comparatively to playing.
I use role coach primarily because of my experience with it, and also just because he is really talking about kind of the the specific trainers that I would think from like an NFL team or something. There's trainers that work at very specific skills, right? And that is like if you're, for example, a trainer who works like a batting coach, I guess, for baseball. Like a batting coach can't suddenly become a tackling coach in football without that specific training. Whereas I really do like the point that he makes about like general managers, directors, head coaches. And that was the kind of those soft skills were the ones that I was talking about as being extremely transferable. And Packing and myself both agreed that it's actually something that the more times you transfer, the more different skills you pick up, and you actually probably get better at it the more you transfer. So yeah.
Well, there's our coaching answer. We got two nice different opinions. And speaking of differing opinions, is that we have sort of hit the end of the episode, but we need to have another mailbag for you guys for next week. And I have a great one, I think, that could definitely bring out some differing opinions. What I want you guys to tell us in the YouTube comments, if you're all watching on YouTube or, wherever you may be, Twitter, Reddit, because I'm sure we're still after the Reddit post for our contested mailbag.
Shout out to Homebound.
Homebound 11 is that should a player, you can use Kaluge specifically in this example for the Titans, when we're talking about, or just any player in general, because there's plenty of other examples. Should a player that, let's say, if they have an incident 2 to 3 years ago, and you can put whatever qualifiers you might add, whether it be age or whatnot, if it is something that they did that was pretty heinous and, against what we think an Overwatch League player should do, and should they be allowed to compete in Overwatch League after they've already apologized and been punished? Or should something like that generally keep them out because it's not the standard that you want Overwatch League players to be? Do you want them to be higher? Let us know, but what is sort of your statute of limitations on player behavior in return to the Overwatch League? And where does it end? Where does it begin? You can use Collusion example, or you can pick whatever player or hypothetical you may want.
Summarized, do you give somebody a second chance or give somebody else their first?
Exactly. That is a good summarization, but that is going to be it for us for today. We sort of ran a little bit long. I think Off the Break is after this with Lando today, because we are in the once a week format for Off the Break now. So Lando will be on after us if you're sticking around for the COD stuff. But for us, we are done. Hit us up with that mailbag answers later for next week, and we'll take a look at them. And I'm Avast. This is Jayne, and that has been Contested.